Hello students and welcome again to Legacy IAS Academy, and let's continue with our economic survey series with chapter 4 on prices and inflation, understanding the dynamics. So we'll dive deep into this in order to understand is inflation high, which kind of inflation is high, what are the kinds of inflation, and they are high for what specific reason. We'll see everything. So let's continue. So if you talk about inflation, the inflation can be controlled with the help of monetary policy. The monetary policy committee comes up with different policy rates in order to control inflation. Of course, they also have to take into account the growth, but inflation targeting is there in India, wherein we target 4 plus minus 2% of inflation. So in this graph, you can see the effect of monetary targeting on headline inflation. We'll see how the interest rates have probably, that's one of the reasons. Of course, there will be many reasons, but monetary policy has helped bring down or at least keep the inflation stabilized. So if you look at the headline inflation across the countries, so it's quite high in UK. Where is India? India is over here, which is this. So this is India, this is India, and this is India. So India's headline inflation has also sort of stabilized. Now, why that has happened? One certain reason can be with respect to the monetary policy targeting that lowered the inflation. Okay, now how did it do that? So if you look at the interest rates or the policy rates, so we can look at the policy rates, average policy rate of the country in 2022, 23 and 24. So if you can see, average policy rate has increased. Now in 2024, it has sort of remained constant, not changed, but has increased to 5.9, 5.8. So that is quite a high increase. And because of this increase, you can see that there has been a decline in inflation. I hope that's absolutely clear. But one thing that it does, when you increase the repo rate, when you increase the policy rate, it sort of slows down the growth, which is evident from here that from 4.1, the growth rate of the world has gone down to 2.9. So it's always a trade-off between growth and the policy rate. And as we speak, see, in India, the inflation is high, but at the same time, the growth globally is slow. In India, India is growing at a good pace, but as compared to the potential of India, it's not that fast. 6.4% is not that fast for India. We want to be faster. So as we speak, the Monetary Policy Committee has cut down the repo rate by 25 basis points, means by 0.25%. So they have slashed or cut down or brought down the repo rate. This may lead to slight inflation, but will also help the growth of the economy. Why inflation? Because now the loans, interest on the loans will be less, so more people will be willing to take loans. That means more money in the market, that means more demand, that means more inflation, but at the same time it will also mean more growth. Then there has been moderation in core inflation. Now what is the difference between headline inflation and core inflation? Headline inflation consists of all the goods and services that are present in the basket, which in which the increase of the prices checked. Core inflation is the inflation in that basket minus, after subtracting the few things. What are those things? Food and power, electricity, or basically power, electricity, fuel. The same thing, you can write it in general as power. So core inflation is headline inflation minus food plus power. Now they are also now reducing the transportation charges from headline inflation, because that also fluctuate. Transportation is dependent upon what? Fuel. So it is similar, comes under the same category. So when you subtract this from headline inflation, you get core inflation. Why are you subtracting this? Because food and power, they are highly frequently fluctuating. Since they fluctuate a lot, you cannot understand about other goods and services in the market, in the economy. That is why you eliminate them and understand or study the rest of the inflation via the core inflation. Now the core inflation, if you look at, has stabilized. This is India. So this is our core inflation. So if you look at core inflation in India, it has gone down. Okay. Of course, because you have anyhow, it has gone down more because you have anyhow reduced or removed the effect of food. That means what? That means food inflation is the major culprit. Food inflation is the major culprit. Food inflation is quite high. Now, when it comes to food inflation, this is where India is. So this and this. So if you can see, there is hardly any reduction in food inflation. So food inflation is still present and is still there. Now, headline inflation versus core inflation is fine, not much of a difference, because apart from food, there are various other things also present in headline inflation. So when you remove food and power, still a lot of things are present. So not much impact will happen, but still there will be an impact. You will generally see that the headline inflation will be higher than the core inflation, at least now. Why? Because food inflation is at a higher level. So if you see CPI, the overall headline inflation, it has consistently been higher. So if you look at core inflation, that means subtracting the food and power, it has been lower. Only at few stages here and here it has gone up, as it has been lower. Since it has been lower, you can say that food inflation is on the higher side. Now WPI wholesale price index has been, apart from this phase, it has been on the lower side of the consumer price index. Now coming on to the major culprit, that is food inflation. It is said, the economic survey says that it is driven specifically due to the vegetables and pulses. So if you look at food inflation month on month, it has been high. This is the average, close to 8%, and here the average is above 8%, and it is high due to the vegetables and pulses. If you can see, in financial year 24, it was less than or close to 15. Now it is about 20 or more than that. When it comes to pulses, it has reduced, but still it is close to 15. So these two are the major culprit. So in inflation, food inflation is the major culprit, and in food inflation, vegetable and pulses are the major culprit, and that is why we see one of the steps taken by the government under budget to address this. Now commodity specific prices, if you talk about, so if you look at the prices of tomato, they are fluctuating frequently. If you look at the prices of onion, this is also on the rise. Tomatoes and onions keep fluctuating and they go to exorbitant level. So there is a higher peak. Early, the peak is suddenly shot up to 120. This is a huge amount of jump that is there. One of the reason to have food inflation. Now, so we can clearly see that the food inflation is there due to just few food items. Doesn't it mean that there is sort of a skewflation that is happening? This should be W here. SKEW, skewflation. Now, what do you understand by skewflation? Skewflation is the inflation caused due to increase in the prices or sustained increase in the prices of few of the commodities in the basket of goods and services. So probably we are on the verge, we are witnessing skewflation in food inflation, because, and also in headline they are mentioning, because this headline and food inflation is driven by just few food items. You can clearly see here consumer food price index. So consumer food price index is this. Now consumer food price index excluding top, tomato, onion and potato, if you exclude it, it goes down. If you exclude all the vegetables and pulses, it goes further down. So vegetable and pulses are playing the most important role, and among that, top or tomato, onion, potato is playing a major role when it comes to the food inflation. When it comes to headline inflation is this. If you remove top, it goes beyond. You can clearly see the difference. If you remove the entire vegetable and pulses, you can see there is even more difference. So vegetable and pulses are the things that is causing high food inflation, in that specifically tomato, onion and potato. Now that would probably be happening because there is, let's say, reduction in production. Now why? Climate change is one such factor. In fact, one of the most important factors, and in climate change, the heat waves. So the heat waves have increased in the last 3 years. If you look at it, the incidences of heat waves from 12, 23 to directly 75 and presently 76 heat waves. So too much of heat waves are there. The rise in crop area that was damaged. So in million hectares, it is around 2 million hectares, slightly less than that. But then look at the jump, over 3 million hectares, close to 3.5 million hectares of area is impacted. And when you talk about onion and tomatoes, the states that produce high amount of onion and potatoes are also the states that have been hit by heat waves highly. For example, Maharashtra, the state of Maharashtra. All these states have been hit highly, and hence the production has gone down. Hence, there is an increase in the prices of these commodities, hence leading to increase in the or inflation in the food, and subsequently overall inflation as well. Now, what are the provisions? So we saw that food inflation or inflation, headline inflation, is due to vegetables and pulses. Pulses also one of the very important things. We are having a shortfall of it consistently, and we have to import it, so the prices are further high. So the government has come up with the Atmanirbharta in pulses. Atmanirbharta means self-dependence, meaning independence, or meaning not depending on someone else but on your own self for producing the pulses. So self-dependence in pulses is a very important thing. Plus the government is having fiscal policy prudence, means it is targeting a lower fiscal deficit, which will also help to address or stabilize this inflation which is there. But this is very important. There is special focus on tur, urad and masoor. These pulses are given special focus. In general, it is Atmanirbharta in pulses, specifically in these three, which should address to some extent in the long run also the food inflation in particular and the headline inflation in general. Thank you.